Hello VC. Thought I'd do something a little different today. Instead of showing the recent acquisitions that I've got to my record collection, I thought I would talk a bit about the flea market that used to run very close to my house a number of years ago, and sort of some stories and grails and fails that occurred during that time. The flea market is long since closed. It closed about 5 years ago, and I discovered it way back in time when men were men and the sheep knew it. So let's get into some flea market stories, and this will be part one. So many stories, I think I'm going to break this up into a series of videos. And we're going to start with when I discovered the flea market and when I got back into vinyl collecting. My first visit to the flea market, it was only open on Sundays from 9 to 5. I got there on a Sunday afternoon. It was absolutely packed. It took me a few minutes to find where all the vinyl guys were. They're all down on one end. And looked up on the wall and saw my favorite singer. And this was the very first record that I bought at the flea market. And my very first purchase at the flea market is a little bit of a score. As you can see, the title of the album is Lady Sex. This is a German pressing. They didn't want this title in North America. In North America, the album is titled Easy Does It. And so as a result, this one is a little bit collectible. I think on Discogs, average price is $80, and high price might be $120, $130, something like that. So it turned out the very first album I bought was a little bit of Grail. So I started speaking with the vendors, and I would say to them, if you get any Julie London albums, save them for me. And I should mention too, on this particular album, I bought it, it was $5 is what I paid for it. And $5 is sort of a watershed mark, because when I started collecting, while buying records, I was not a collector. I am buying used records to listen to the music. And so $5 was pretty much my limit. And also keep in mind that at this point in time, the vinyl resurgence hadn't started yet. It would not start for several years down the road. So there weren't that many people looking for vinyl. And the other thing to keep in mind, back in those days, you didn't have all the reissues that you have now. Now you got labels like, what is it? Sundays, that is just dedicated to reissues. So back then, if you wanted a record, there's a good chance there was no reissue, and you had to go out and get the original pressing and the pressings from back in the day and pay whatever the market demanded. So I'm starting to hit that flea market every Sunday. $5 is my limit on a record. And I'm telling all the vendors, if you got any Julie London, let me know. And I guess it was only about my fourth visit to the flea market. I come in through the door, and the guy who ran the place saw me and goes, "Hey, Julie London guy, come over here." So I come over here, and he takes a bag out from underneath the table, and he pours 7 Julie London albums on the table and says, "As far as I'm concerned, Julie London's not collectible, so you can have these records." 2 of them were greatest hits in poor condition, and I threw them in the garbage when I got home. But the other 5 were original pressings from the 50s, and they were a great find. Just going to show you a couple of those 5. Here's 2 of them. First, Julie London was on the Liberty label. So just a couple more weeks after that, the same vendor sees me come in and he goes, "Hey, Julie London guy, come over here. I've got a record, a Julie London record, but I can't give it to you. I have to sell it." And so I got a little bit nervous because my limit on a record is like $5, yet I feel obligated to purchase whatever he's got because he gave me all those records. So what he showed me, Canadian pressing, Julie London's very first album, 1955. Back then, it's more of like almost like a paper type jacket, not the cardboard. But the record appeared to have never been played. The vinyl was in mint condition. So I go, "Oh great, yes, I want that record. How much?" I'm sweating bullets. And he thinks for a moment, and he goes, "Give me $5 for it." I went, "Oh, thank God." Yeah, I gave him the $5 and got that. So over the course of the next year, I'd go there every Sunday, and I learned to get there around 7:30 in the morning because that's when all the vinyl guys showed up. And back then, it was the same group of people, so the same vendors, and there would be about 7 or 8 buyers, same ones every Sunday, showing up around 7:30 in the morning to see what's in the bins that the vendors were bringing in. And it stayed that way for a few years because, like I said, the vinyl resurgence hadn't started. So you would think, well, for $5, you're not going to get very much. But back in those days, yeah, you could. For example, just about every one of my Beach Boys albums I purchased back then for $3 each. Just going to show a few of the ones I purchased, and not going to show everything. So these are all the Capitol Rainbow pressings, $3 each. They were all in excellent condition. The one that I did not get for $3, and in fact did not even see back in the day, of course, was Pet Sounds. I would go on to buy Pet Sounds at the flea market, but not until about 6 or 7 years later, and definitely more than $3. That's the original mono pressing of Pet Sounds. Another group that you could get every day for $3, a group that I really like because I was sort of into the surf scene a bit, was the Ventures. Here's an example of a few of the records I picked up from them for $3. It was buying Venture records was actually where I sort of made my first mistake. As I mentioned, I wasn't a collector back then. I was just buying used records on the cheap so I could listen to the music. And one day I went up to a vendor and he had a box of Venture records, 10 records in the box, $3 each. So I went through and said, "Yeah, I want these records. I want 9 of them. I don't want the 10th one," which was the Christmas album. And so I left that one behind. But of course, that gives you a gap in your collection. And so in hindsight, that was a mistake. A bit of a fail there. Nowadays, if I saw those 10, I'd grab all 10, just so that there's no gap in sort of that collection. So that was a mistake, a small one. But leave nothing behind is sort of what I've learned now. There was one day I went into the flea market early on, and I remember I didn't get too much. I didn't have much money. I might have bought 1 or 2, and I had $5 left in my pocket. That was it. And I came up to a vendor that he was in a different location that day, and he had a table set up, and it was all like that 80s new wave stuff, and I like that stuff. So I said to him, "How much are your records?" And he said they're $1 each. So I said, okay. And I thought, well, yeah, I can get 5 records. I got $5. So I started thumbing through the records and selected a couple. And then he leans into me and says, "I tell you what, if you buy more than 4 records, I'll sell the records to you at 25 cents each." And all the records were in excellent condition. So $5, that gets me 20 records. And just an example, Human League. Is this one here? Flock of Seagulls. Dead or Alive. Thomas Dolby. Well, you can't go wrong when records are 25 cents each. So there were a lot of records still, that a lot of great artists that you could get for under $5, and one artist that was always priced $5 or less, and I grabbed everything I could find because I'm a real big fan of her, and that is Nancy Sinatra. Looks like she forgot to put her pants on that day. That happens to the best of us. There she is again with underpants. Well, she may be wearing tights or something. That's probably what it is. Of course, that's her big hit. Boots Are Made for Walking. There's another one of my favorite covers. So Nancy Sinatra, everything $5 or less. Most of her stuff was in the $2 bin back in the day. Someone whose all their records were in the $2 bin, and I liked her very early stuff. I think I bought her first 5 or 6 albums. That was Brenda Lee. This is the original Decca pressing. It has a couple of her big hits on here. Sweet Nothings, I'm Sorry. It was $2, as were all her other. Someone else who was pretty cheap, usually between $3 and $5. Dusty Springfield. Here's just a couple of samples. I picked up all her albums when I could find them. Here's one a lot of people seem to be interested in from Dusty Springfield. One particular group that was always $1, never seen it for more than $1, was the Supremes. I would pick up all their albums for $1. Why not? They're all in great shape and all that. So, one day I was walking through the flea market, and I see a Supremes album up on a rack. And I see 100, I know, $1. And I think, why did he put that on the rack? Because the rack normally held collectibles. So I walk up and I grab the record and I'm staring at it. And I noticed there's no decimal between the 1 and the 0. And I said to the individual who owned the records, the vendor, "How much is this record?" And he said, "It's $100. And I'm like, what? What the hell are you talking about? $100 for a Supremes album? Are you out of your mind? And he goes, no. See, this is their very first album. It's the very first press of their first album. And it's rare because of the jacket. It had, I guess, the 3 girls sitting on stools or something. And then subsequent to that, as they printed more issues of that particular record, they changed the cover. And this is the second cover for their first album, Meet the Supremes. So I picked this one up for $1. So I gingerly put that $100 record back on the rack and slowly backed away. And I'm thinking, who in their right mind would pay $100 for a used album? And at that moment, one of the guys who was always there every Sunday, he's always there before I arrived, and he was always still there when I left. He walked up, looked at the album, and bought it. So I almost had a heart attack on his behalf. But that's just a quick little overview of the very early days of the flea market. I'd say really this is going back probably 15 years ago or so. It's hard to really gauge, but that sort of gives you a sense of what I was buying back in those days. So this will be the end of part 1, the flea market early days, and there will be subsequent videos, so stay tuned.